just that turning them off. Be like, I can't do this. I can't be in the same room with a dead body. Or even an elderly person that's all ashen and, kind of sunken and looking the way they look, just couldn't do it. And that's like a pretty typical thing. Like, you're going to have to spend quite a lot of time there at that scene waiting for the right resources to show up to process it.
Welcome to the Firearms Nation podcast. I'm your host, Ark Levy, and tonight we are going to get in depth with what it's like to actually run a podcast. And I'm not talking about myself. I'm bringing on a guest who is not only a law enforcement officer, but he runs a very popular podcast for police officers called Things Police See. And my guest tonight is Stephen Gould. Before we get started in the show, if you are turning in live, welcome to the show. I won't be able to answer questions as we go along, but if you do have questions for myself or Steve, we'll find out at the end of the show, at the end of the interview, we will get to them. And for all those who are just listening to this on the podcast, thank you for continuing to listen to that show. We've been doing it for a long time. If you haven't subscribed or left a review, please do so. That helps the podcast, specifically on Apple Podcasts. That helps the algorithm know what to promote to other people. And, and I always say it right now, and we'll probably talk about tonight, the firearms world is under attack. It's constantly under attack, and our content is being suppressed. So let's get out there. Let's promote this stuff. And without further ado, I'm going to bring on Stephen. How are you, my friend?
Good. Thank you for having me, brother.
Oh, sure. I figured you decided to wake up today and say, I'm going to see what I could possibly do to get his sphincter all wrapped up before the show started.
I like to start texting like 5 minutes before we go live my demands. Where's my Perrier water? Where's my special background?
Oh my goodness. And as well as I do, it's always that, the pre-show, trying to get everything ready, trying to get everything perfect, the lighting, the computer, everything up and going, the camera. And then there's inevitably something that doesn't go right.
Every time. When I first started my podcast like 4 years ago, I had this older 2013 laptop I was using, a Mac. It was a good computer, but not for this type of thing. So it was starting to overheat. So I put a whole big drive together with listeners. They ended up buying me a new computer. Well, here we are 4 years later. I had to get another computer because that one started overheating. Totally fine any other moment except before going live. It would overheat. I'd have to restart my computer, and then the clock's ticking to the time you're supposed to be live. I'm starting to sweat. I'm turning pink. Just like what we just experienced. But in this case, I'm on an away game, so I'm feeling okay.
Right. And, we got it all set up. Of course, if you're on the live stream on Facebook, if you're one of those people, thank you. I have no idea. I wanted to do it. I tried it out last night. It didn't seem like it was working properly. So I thought I'd scratch it. But Stephen convinced me to try it out. So we are going live to Facebook, or at least hopefully Facebook and YouTube. I do see that YouTube is up. But so Stephen, do you go by Stephen or Steve?
Steve's good.
Okay, Steve. I wanted to bring you onto the show. I enjoy your show. It's like I said in the intro, it's Things Police See. Lots of great interviews with a whole bunch of different people.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. You've been doing this now for a while. You said for 4 years. I know you're a law enforcement officer in somewhere of the countryside of Massachusetts. Is that correct?
Western Mass. Yep.
Western Mass. You've been in law enforcement for how long now?
I'm in like my 16th year. So I started 4 years as a natural resource officer, and then the last 12-ish as just straight up police.
And when you say natural resource officer, now down here in Florida, where it's sunny and about 85, 86 degrees, I don't know what it's like up there. We have FWC, which is Fish and Wildlife Commission, and they're the people that go out on the airboats. They have they check the hunters, the fishing license, all that stuff. Is that what natural resource officer is?
Yeah, it's similar. It's kind of unique to where I was on Cape Cod when I started. I grew up on Cape Cod, which for people who don't know the region, that's the little arm that sticks off Massachusetts, and it's got a lot of estuaries, very unique kind of natural resource makeup. So there's actually, not only is there state, but there's also a lot of the towns choose to have their own enforcement department that is comprised of harbor master, shellfish constable, conservation agent, animal control, and also sworn as police. So that I was in one of those smaller agencies. It wasn't the state one. It's like a local game warden, pretty much. They're sworn, gun and badge and the whole thing, but it's not really typical police work, just dealing with wildlife management and enforcement of state and local fisheries regulations, stuff like that.
Now, you said you started as that. Where did you progress to?
From there, I went to a couple towns away. I became a police officer in town of Eastham, and I spent about 10 years there. So great place to be a cop. It's, again, if you're not from Cape Cod, it's a really weird place to live, to get used to. We had city cops come in and do a summer and be like, oh, it's great here. And then the winter, they're like, I'm pulling my hair out. I can't do this. Because the towns will literally go from, a town like Eastham will go from like 6,000 people to 40,000 with pretty much the same amount of cops. And then, the fall rolls around again, the winter, it gets real quiet. So it's cyclical, it's a weird up and down. And a lot of people don't like it. And I think the way Cape Cod is seasonally kind of contributes to the huge opiate problem there. There's a lot of heroin, a lot of overdoses, and similar to like the Pacific Northwest, or it's like the winters are cold, lots of cold rain, some snow. They're desolate, no one's there, and the summers it all comes to life again. So it's kind of weird to get used to, But I grew up there, so I'm fine with it.
So you liked being a police officer? You thought it was a better profession than doing the same thing as a resource officer?
Yeah, because the resource officer thing at the time, where we were very separated from the police department, so we weren't able to get much overtime. There wasn't a lot of roadwork details. There wasn't really a way to make extra, let's say. Like, it was a great job, like patrol boats, ATVs, checking hunters, and it was a very cool job, but it was hard at the time to get any kind of extra income. So I was young. I was like 22 when I started, and I wanted to get a house and start a family and have not have like a ceiling on what I could earn. And I was kind of gravitating that way anyways. My dad was he retired a lieutenant at a local department after 32 years, and the story goes, I went to college, I got a computer degree. And after my first year, I called my dad and I was like, listen, I think I really want to get a criminal justice degree. And he's like, don't be an idiot. He's like, you can be a cop with a high school diploma. Just get the computer degree. I minored in business. He's like, just get that degree. And then if you still want to be a cop, you can do that, but have something else. Because he just had, he'd got his degree on the job. So I think he knew what was going to happen. I graduated. I tried one other job for 2 months. Quit, immediately got into law enforcement, and that was kind of the track I went on from there. And I just grew up, my dad was a cop, and I really looked up to him, and he would come home for every meal in uniform, gun and badge. And to me, I drive around town with him doing errands, and he seemed to know something about everybody in town. People would randomly come up to him and thank him. Oh, thank you for some crisis that happened that he was there for, some crash, some suicide. He was the one that helped people. So to me, it was almost like, at that age, it was almost like the only job to me. I was like, to me, it was a way to be have such an impact and be such a force, but not have to be like, anybody could do it. You could apply and you could become that. To me, that was like amazing. So that's it sucked me in, although it took a little bit longer,
Well, I think I think you brought up a really good point that, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who listen to this show who can relate to it. First of all, being a father and being around and raising boys is such a huge thing. And you become, especially in these service jobs, police, firefighters, military, you take on these leadership qualities. And especially the younger kids, they look at that and they see aspects of one, what it's like to be a man, right? What are the things that you're doing? You're doing these type A personality type stuff.
Right.
Yes, we're all crazy for money, right? Just like any stockbroker, who doesn't want more money, right? That's why you and I do this thing.
Right.
But there is something about that I see a lot of kids, sons of fellow officers who end up, no matter what, in law enforcement, or they follow their father's footsteps in the military. They'll go after that thing because they see that role model, and it's such an important thing. So I'm sure, your dad seems like he was a decent guy, and he instilled that into you, and here you are today, which is terrific.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he tried to tell me to be a firefighter like a dozen times, but
everybody says that.
He did. He's like, just, if you got to do it, do that side. And I'm like, nah, I can't do it. I got to be a cop. I was a kid asking him every other supper he came home if I could see his gun. Like, can you take the gun out? He'd be like, if you cannot ask me for 5 days, then the 6th day we can go in the other room. I'll unload my weapon and I'll let you hold it. That was me. I was like, I just loved it. That was like right from the beginning.
Were you fortunate to have him take you to the range at all?
Absolutely, man. He, when I was 7, got me a 22, like one of those little, it's actually a Rossi, but it's just a knockoff of the little Winchester, the little pump that you'd have in the carnival. I still have it. It's over in my gun safe. Man, I love that gun. He would take us and we would go out to power lines or go out and deep into the woods and shoot it. And he didn't go to the range a lot. He'd rather go out in the woods and set stuff up. Once we found an old car and we shot a bunch of holes, and it was like, an old car from the 60s out there in the woods. And I ended up telling my teachers during what did you do on the weekend? And I told them I shot a car, and they're like, I think Steve's telling stories. And my dad was like, no, we shot a car out in the woods. But he really instilled in me when it came to firearms, he was very serious. And when we went to go shoot, he had a rule where the laser rule with the barrel, and if you came across any part of anybody's body, loaded or unloaded with the gun, day was over. So I can still remember, like, the second time we went, I was getting the 22 out of the case. It's like a long case. So you got to pull it out and be careful. And I went across his leg with it, and he was like, get in the car, we're leaving.
Wow.
I mean, I was looking forward to this day for weeks, and we just went home. I cried the whole way, and he said, listen, this is a lesson you need to learn about firearms. And so he always took it very, very serious. In a lot of ways, I got him back into target shooting because he was at the point in his life, he wasn't going a lot. He'd qualify for the police force and all that, but it became neat again to introduce it to me. So I know it hurt him a lot too, because he wanted to go shooting that day, but he felt like it was really his responsibility to instill that one lesson. And I never did that again. Never, because I didn't want to blow it,
I'm sure. And so when did you decide that you really wanted to be a cop?
I think my second month, or I graduated college, did the summer, had an awesome summer gig. I worked as an assistant harbor master for the harbor master in Orleans, which has like a ton of inlets in the Atlantic Ocean, and Nauset Beach, and Lighthouse Beach to East Hampstead to the north, all day just helping kayakers and girls in bikinis and the whole thing. Great job, jumping waves in the patrol boat. And then I went to work for an insurance company, and I sat there for
that'll do it.
Yeah, just 2 months of I literally had to go, like, my mom helped me buy a suit. I had to go to a store like Banana Republic or something and get like, what's business casual? Okay, now I need to wear a tie. So I bought all these clothes, and I remember wearing them for like 2 months and just being like, this sucks. Like, this job is like, I'm just stuck in here. Like, you just look so forward to lunch. You're like, oh, lunch. I can't wait. Or even if you didn't smoke, like, oh, people are smoking. Let's go out there. And you find ways not to do your work, because it's just so boring. And I can remember there was a newspaper there. This was like 2002. And this natural resource officer job popped up. And I'd been an assistant harbor master for 5 summers and had done a good job, had a good relationship with the harbor master. And it was for the marine officer position, like the equivalent to harbor master. And I thought, this is it. I'm going for this job. And I literally applied for this job and quit the job I was at within a week. I didn't have the other job yet. I just left. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. This is the job I want to do. And I remember my old boss, I called him. He said, yep, I'll give you a recommendation. I actually know the head of that department. I'll give him a call. And he said, he called him and he called me back. He said, Steve, I talked to him. They got like 40 or 50 applicants. So don't put all your eggs in this basket. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm not going to quit my job or anything. I already had. But I ended up getting it. And it was like one of the happiest days of my life. It was so cool.
Yep. I remember when I got that call too, that I had passed everything and I was going to have my academy date. But the FWC guys down here and probably what you did up there, that is a really cool job. And I give a lot of props out to people who do that, simply because a lot of times they're without backup. When you're checking on people who are hunting, you're going up against armed people, they're decent people, but you never know,
right.
By yourself. And at least down here, you're learning man tracking, you're learning animal tracking. We have anacondas and gators down here, so there's stuff you got to learn to deal with that. We have airboats.
Yeah.
It's a lot of cool stuff. I know a lot of it. We work closely in my jurisdiction. We're right on the Everglades, so we work very close with them. And I remember there was a deer that got lost because we're in the Everglades, so there's wildlife. But he came into the city and he got stuck into someone's backyard, and it was like I want to say it right because I'm not really a deer guy, but it was like a 10-point buck. Is that right? It was
yeah, that's right.
10 points.
Nice rack.
Nice rack, exactly.
Nice.
And the people are coming up, please don't shoot him and everything. So we had to call FWC, and there's only 2 people in the whole state of Florida, which is kind of crazy, that were authorized to tranquilize a deer. And
really?
So we had to wait. Oh yeah. We had to wait for this guy to come down. He finally came down. He had the tranquilizer gun and everything, and he shot him and took care of business. But I always thought that was so cool.
They tranquilized him?
They tranquilized him and I guess rehabilitated him, gave him a defense attorney and everything, and sent him down.
Man, that doesn't sound very Florida to me. Up here, we just blast him. The guy on duty, if you go to a deer, you just shoot it.
Now, I think I talked to you before. I'm not really a hunter, so I don't know exactly how the laws go with that. But yeah, he said that they would trank it. Now with the anacondas, which are those the large pythons that are invasive in our whole area.
Yeah,
those people go out and shoot up. They pay people to go and shoot those things because they're not indigenous to this area, and they've just been totally wiping out a lot of species. But the deer, I guess the deer is okay. But I always thought that was a cool job to be able to do that, and and they've done some stuff in the past where they've tracked some cop killers and took care of business. But you didn't stay in Massachusetts. You decided to follow, I think it's Horace Greeley, and go west, young man, and you went out to Los Angeles, my old stomping grounds. How did you get out to LA?
Yeah, we had a bit of wanderlust, I'd say. And luckily, it was in synchronicity with my wife's wanderlust. So we were in agreement, but we were both born and raised in Cape Cod, lived there our whole lives, and we got to a point in our mid-30s where we just were like, geez, it'd be neat to see another part of the country, not just see it, but go on vacation, like, oh, it'd be cool to live here. Then you go back home. Like, I'd like to actually go somewhere and live there. So my wife was like, yeah, it would be neat to kind of like try another area out, see the country. And this wasn't overnight. We talked about this. This is like in the evening at the end of the day, having a glass of wine or something. It went on for a few years. We just, yeah, that would be cool. And then finally, I was like, we own our house on Cape Cod. It would rent in a day. There's literally no rentals around here, and everybody wants one. And we could back up and go somewhere. And, we have good job histories. We're able-bodied. Who's to say we couldn't just land somewhere and get employment and make it work? And so we really got into watching tiny living shows. We ended up buying a big camper. Me, my wife, my 2 kids at the time. We have 3 now, but there was only 2 then. And we did it. We rented the house. We lived in my parents' down by their barn for the remainder of summer. And I shot an application out to LAPD backgrounds because they accept civilian background investigators, and never heard anything. And we just went across country, and we took like 40, 50 days, saw all the sites, went everywhere we wanted to go. And we landed in Southern California in San Dimas football rules. And I'll never forget that we came in at night. That morning when the sun came up, we were up, and immediately was snow-capped mountains, but it was like 68 degrees out. I mean, it was a great introduction to the area. And we had visited that area before and thought, man, to truly California dreaming, like this place is, the climates, the variety of things you can do, it's incredible here. So we decided to go there. We just found a campground that you could like live in monthly, comfortably, beautiful place. And it was, I think, $1,100 a month total for everything. And that's cheap rent, being 40 minutes from LA. And as luck would have it, we were only there for a month or 2, and I got a call from LAPD backgrounds, and they wanted to know if I wanted an interview, if I was in the area, because even my address on the resume was Massachusetts, so I figured they're never gonna go for this. But they must have been at the bottom of the barrel, so they called me, and I went in, and they even told me, hey, backgrounds traditionally only offers part-time first, and then once you're part-time for a while and we know that you get it, then there may be a full-time spot in the future. And I told them right in the interview, I said, I need health insurance, I need stability. Part-time sounds good, but I need a full-time gig. And they're like, well, it's very rare that we would ever do that. So I went in for an interview, and the interview in LA, I don't know if it's because it's LA, but they had a panel interview, and then they had role playing during the interview. They had one of the office worker comes in that does like theater, and he was like a disgruntled candidate that had been lying to me, and I had to kind of put the screws to him a little bit, but not too much, because they're very wary of getting the battle-hardened homicide detective who's going to like put the lamp on their face. And they were at the time trying to get away from that type of investigator, someone who was a little bit, I don't know, softer. I'm definitely softer than most of those guys. So, and also the fact that I came from a town where we only had a couple of detectives, so you could hold your investigations yourself. I did recorded interviews myself. I had suspects come in myself. I did ruses myself. I did all this stuff myself. With really big stuff, the detectives would help you, if a warrant needed to be done or whatever. But I'd done a lot of interviews. So they liked that aspect of it, surprisingly, because they're surrounded by all these cities with all these cops looking to get in. But I guess I interviewed well, and they liked my background. And they called me a couple weeks later, and they said, want to offer you the job. And the manager said, and believe it or not, it's the full-time gig. And I said, hallelujah, I'll take it. Absolutely. When they're like, when can you come in and be fingerprinted? I'll be like, how's 40 minutes? And they're like, oh, okay, we'll have somebody ready, So that was it. And I got into that background unit for LAPD, and it was amazing. I mean, 2 desks away from me was Ron Phillips, the managing supervisor of the O.J. Simpson trial. There was robbery homicide guys, good buddy of mine, Jay Moberly. This guy's a legend in LAPD, solved quadruple homicides, been in a bunch of gunfights. There's just special agents there. All these people like either injured or retired on the job. And it was just an incredible experience. And that's where I got the idea for the podcast, was just having lunch with these guys. And they would tell these insane, I mean, we all have our war stories, right, from police work, but to hear them every day, and at the time, it was really coming down on police, and it feels like it hasn't stopped, but this was like 2018, end of 2017, and to hear the stories, I kept thinking, if people could be a fly on the wall and really hear some of the stories were so screwed up, and you're like, how are you a normal person to endure this kind of trauma? Like, that's what I'm thinking. And I said, geez, if I could get this on a podcast, that would be great. I mean, why not? If these guys would talk. I didn't think they would even talk. I mean, maybe they'll probably be like, I'm not telling these stories. But to my surprise, a lot of them were up for it. And some of my earliest episodes came out right out of that background unit, and they are crazy stories. And some of them wouldn't talk, but a lot of them would. And man, that got me my start, because I just was surrounded by potential interviews. Everywhere I turned a corner, there was another guy like, hey, want to come to the podcast? You know, it was great, man. Great experience. So that's how we ended up in California.
So before we get into your podcast, I just want to say that you were there for a while. Why did you move back? And then you took a job as a law enforcement officer somewhere else.
Yes. So while we were there, I ended up becoming an insurance investigator for a private company, a fraud investigator. And
you're back with insurance.
Yeah. This time an investigator, though. So like a field investigator. And a buddy of mine was a manager for the West Coast. I knew him from college. He had an opening. And backgrounds was becoming less and less desirable to work out, to be honest. It was the way they managed it was not great. It was constantly failing. The wages, believe it or not, was one of the worst wages in the city. It was like, because it had traditionally been a home for guys who were retired for extra money.
Sure.
So, but now they're getting people like me who were there who are like, hey, this is my career. And now the wages are way up, but they weren't at the time. So my buddy came across with, hey, we have an opening here for this investigator. And we'd talked for years back and forth, like, hey, let me know when there's an opening. That sounds good. And the pay was great. Take home car, pay for your internet, book your own travel, work from home, everything. So I took that job for another 2 years. And in that 2 years, we moved to the high desert in California. And we had 2 acres enclosed, little 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. And it was awesome. We ended up getting dairy goats. We got chickens. We had a view of the snow-capped mountains that we, had the other side of them that we'd woken up to in San Dimas. And we really loved that lifestyle. Like, we loved it. And as the kids got older and my parents would come visit every 6 months or a year, they were just, people age really fast. And when you see them in that kind of schedule, and we had another baby, my son, Mark, and we were just like, we need to get closer to our family. Like, this has been an amazing experience, but we were really feeling that pull to be within striking distance of least of our family. So that's ultimately what did it for us. And we ended up moving back, and my academy was good for like another 8 months before it expired. And Massachusetts at that time was giving you 5 years. So for every year you miss, there's extra you have to do to get your cert back. If you're out a year, it's just like CPR and firearms. If you're out 2 years, CPR, firearms, first responder, DT that you missed, updates. And then if you're out 4 years like I was, it was like 160 hours of in-service training. Oh. So I happen to know, obviously I had police connections back here. I saw this. We wanted to move to Western Mass where we get acreage and have our animals and, have a nice piece of land. And I found a town within striking distance where we wanted to go. And lo and behold, I went to college with this guy, and he was good friends with one of my buddies back on the Cape who's on the PD, and it was just a phone call. He was the chief of police, and he said, we're dying for a guy with experience. That would be great. Let me get a Zoom interview going with the select board. And the rest is history. We ended up selling our house there at a great time, because when we were there, the prices in California were just going up and up and up. So we sold there, had good amount of equity, bought in Western Mass, which was more affordable in California, and landed here. I slipped right back into the job. I did my 160 hours. They let me do it all online, except for like firearms, of course, and CPR, first responder. I had to catch up on. But besides that, they reinstated my certification. I was good to go.
That's awesome. And not you're a sergeant now?
Yep, and I'm a sergeant there.
Patrol sergeant, or you doing investigations?
I do everything. It's very small, so whatever comes in on my shift, I'll do. It's one-man shifts. So there's chief.
Wait, you have one guy running the road?
Mm-hmm. There's chief, sergeant, patrolman, and then 6 part-time patrolmen. So it's an area of, it's about, our jurisdiction is a few towns, and it's about just under 60 square miles and 3,000 people total. So, I mean, it's country policing, 100%. It's getting a cup of coffee at the country store and, hey, Steve, how's it going, Wally? I'm very happy. But I don't know if I'd recommend it for somebody who's like 23 and just got out of an academy, but somebody for where I'm at, I think it's great. And the coolest thing about it too is everybody talks about community policing. I think it's like really overused, that word. But when you work in a real small community, it's not scalable at all, but you truly get to know the community because you wear all the hats. You do everything. If someone doesn't know who to call in your town, or the towns you work for only have a few agencies, it's the police. So you actually meet and get to know I mean, I've been to mental health crisis calls where they're like, "Oh, Steve, we're glad you showed up." Like, it helps big time. And it's really neat to see it's really neat to do that kind of policing. I really like it.
That's very cool. And then, so while you were in LA, you started this podcast, Things Police See. Obviously, it's a good place to start it because you've got show business there and all the resources if you need it to ask questions. But so you start this podcast. Like anybody else starting a podcast, we go towards, I mean, this is the easy way to do it. You go towards the people who are around you, who are willing to come on the show. I mean, that was the reason why I did it, is I had all these connections. I'm like, I want to bring them on the show so other people can have it. But you've been doing it now for 4 years. What was the rationale, just to get people to understand what these people were talking about? Or was there other things that you wanted to do with the show?
Yeah, that was it. I just wanted, especially at the time too, because I wasn't on the job at the time, but working in the background unit embedded too was sworn officers, just to see the media coverage, but then to also contrast that with hearing all my coworkers talk about what it's like or what they went through. I just truly wanted to get their stories out there completely unedited so that people could hear exactly what the men and women of law enforcement do and have to put up with. And they do it willingly, and most of them happily. They choose to do this. And the underappreciation is so great. It's enraging. It's almost worse when you're not a cop anymore. It's like, I don't know. I just felt like someone had to advocate. Someone should put these stories out there. And that's one of my favorite emails I get about the podcast, is somebody who was on the fence or didn't really know. And then they hear you guys come on and they're like, my goodness, I can't believe this. I cannot believe. And it doesn't have to be, like I've had celebrity cops on, but it doesn't have to be them. It can just be, I've had, deputies on from the Midwest, and they have their own crazy, wacky, intense, scary stories that they've done. And people are shocked to hear about it, because it's like, even in little communities, the police department's like this clandestine organization that people really, truly, and they should be thankful they don't know what these people go to. Because it's, even in a town of 1,000, you're going to go to every single death, every single trauma, terrible car wreck, every horrible suicide, and they happen in all these places. And you're going to be there for that. You're going to be standing in this person's kitchen, or the horrible domestic. You'll be standing in that person's house smelling their weird food, or the toilet didn't flush, or, you're inserted directly at a moment's notice into these people's life, and they don't want you there. And you're staying there till it's figured out. And that happens everywhere, So the show's been really a blessing to do. And the fact that I had to struggle to get guests when I started, like I went through all my early ones that were willing, surrounding me. Then I had to start reaching out, and it got harder. But now that people have heard it and like the show, they tell their friends that are cops, and people have heard of it, and they want to come on and share. And even if they use a pseudonym, which is fine, they're willing to come on. And a lot of the guests I have are like cops that have driven around listening for a year and finally been like, all right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to write Steve an email. I'm going to come on and tell my stories, and it's a good time. It's a really fun time. And a lot of times guys are nervous. Guys or girls that come on are nervous. You can tell they're nervous, but by the end of it, they've had a blast just telling their stories, It's cool.
What was your worst episode you've ever done? Besides this one.
How so? What do you mean worst?
Oh, I can think back to a couple of... I've actually recorded interviews that I'm like, there's no way in hell that I'm going to air this because it just sucks. It really sucks. And I don't want to give out names, but this guy was telling me stuff that, in a book he wrote, and he was retired law enforcement. He wrote this book, and I'm asking him questions. It almost became like he was confessing to things. I'm like, why would I even put this out there? What you did was wrong. What you did was wrong. And I'm not going to put this out there. Not to mention, I've had interviews where it took me an hour to just get the connection working. And that is the hard. I think technology has gotten better because technology is growing exponentially. AI is everything now. But I started this show, I want to say in 2017. So it's been 6 years. And it is so much easier now to do these episodes than when I first started. And like you said, you had the fans and some of these computers were going crazy. But just the first time they came up with, what this is, but most people, if I say, I had to study how to get a mix minus on my mixer.
Oh, that was the worst, man. Yes. Thank goodness for the Roadcaster.
Thank goodness for the Roadcaster, because that changed everything. But before that, you had these other computer programs that would allow you to do a mix minus in the stream, right? And they would record locally. And this all happened before COVID. And then when COVID hit, then everyone could do Zoom, and Zoom kind of works. I don't like me personally, I just don't like the way how it handles everything, but I guess now it's even getting better. I was just reading something that's getting better. You can pay for it to get better. But yeah, so when I say the worst episode, I mean, I'm sure in the hundreds of episodes that you've done, there have been some that you just decided not to air, or it was just not worth the effort.
Yeah, I get it now. I've had some really bad experiences where, I'll answer the question, but have you ever done this? Have you ever had a really important guest on and get like 8, 10, 15 minutes in and realize you're not recording? I've done.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man, I want to kill myself. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I'm such a piece of crap, but I didn't. But anyways, that's one thing that's happened. But I have had guests before where I've had people that have the long, storied police careers, and they come on and they really like the show, and they want to share their stories, but they're not storytellers, or they're not even really good conversationalists. So it makes me wonder, why did they want to come on? But thankfully, most cops are good storytellers, that are good at communicating. But I've had guys come on and, they'd be like, well, what was your, most intense call? And they'd be like, well, I had this one guy try to shoot me, and then we ended up chasing him down later. And he did like 20 years. And I'm like,
can we go back?
Yeah. So I have to and sometimes I can salvage it by being like, if I start picking on their response, then the next question, they're like, oh, I need to bring this out a little bit. But some guys don't pick up on it. And the interview's, 18 minutes long. And I'm like, well, this is supposed to be an hour or so. What can you do? It's just kind of a waste of everybody's time. And I always feel really bad. I just kind of don't publish them quietly, and then I've never heard back from them. I don't know if that's the right way to go about it, but I don't know what to do, because you don't want to they reached out, they gave their time to do it, but it wasn't right for it, So yeah, those are probably the worst when the guest doesn't really deliver, because also people don't want to hear me carry an episode, with the guest sitting there listening. That's kind of weird too. So I just kind of end it and like, okay, thank you. Yeah, I'll let you know when and if it's going to go up.
Yes, I've said those words before too. What was the most obnoxious thing that has happened on your show?
From a guest?
Yes.
Oh man, I've never even thought of that, but there are some instances. I've had people, I won't name them because they're notoriety. I've had people insist on having or not them specifically, but their agent has insisted on being present for the interview. Usually if they have a big contract with a network television or something like that, they'll be like, yeah, I need to be present for it. And then I've had them be like, no, actually, you know what? They're a pro. Don't worry about it. And then last minute go, I need to be present. Not asking, Okay. So I put them in. And then at one point I always ask the guests, like you do, to have headphones or a good microphone or a quiet place, good internet connection, so we don't get reverb, there's no delay. It can really screw it up. And podcasts are all about the audio. If if you're searching a podcast and you listen to it and the first 30 seconds the audio sucks, I'm just out. I can't listen. If you're doing your volume knob to try to get the levels right, it's annoying. So it's important to me. So I list that out in the letter I sent, and this one publicist just was like, I was like, did you read the letter? Because you really need to wear some headphones. She's like, well, I have these. She had like these weird wireless ones in.
Always.
And
What
I'm
the
like,
hell is that?
I'm like, well, it was like a jawbone thing or whatever. And I'm like, well, those don't always work right, and I'd hate to like get this great interview from you and have it not work. Oh no, I used these before and it went fine. And I'm like, yeah, but it's already, I can hear it's being a little weird. And the publicist cuts right in. They're fine. We used them before. And I felt like just like ending her call, like, get out of here. No, you're not in this conversation. So that type of stuff is kind of obnoxious to me, I don't like people that don't like even have any decorum with like what you request at all. They just flip it about it, or they come in with like not knowing, like you ask them a question like, woo, police stories. I got to have a few from my career. And I'm like, why did you want to come on? In my head, I'm like, what are you doing? You don't have any stories ready to go, So those are the things that those are my bugaboos, I'd say.
I would say like the worst one I've ever had. I did an interview at a trade show, and we set it up, and he's like, I'm so busy, can you meet me for breakfast? I'm like, sure. So I meet him for breakfast. I'm doing an interview, and you'll appreciate this, in a restaurant. So not a hotel room, not a special room where I had already reserved, but in a restaurant. I'm like, okay, this is going to suck. So I tried to think, I'm at a trade show. I brought as much portable equipment I could possibly have, and you spend a fortune on this stuff. So I had some lavalier mics. I had a decent recorder. This is before the Rodecaster. And I brought all that stuff, mic'd them up. We're doing an interview over breakfast. So someone's eating while they're answering questions about stuff.
That's another one, yeah.
And then at the end, he expects me to pay for the breakfast, right? Because I'm doing the interview, and I'm like, okay, I'll do it because, I want the interview and I'm going to pay for the breakfast. He takes my $200 mic to give back to me, and he drops it in the cream. And I'm like, this just cost me. And I know you think you're that important, but you're not that important that I got to be buying you breakfast, and you just ruined one of my mics.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that. That was another one for my memoirs when I ever write them. I'm like, come on. That was pretty obnoxious.
Yeah. You reminded me, I did have a guy once, a really nice guy and good interview, but he was, at the beginning of it, there was a lot of like clanging and like, like when I was talking, and I was like, what are you doing right now? He's like, oh, I'm just eating a bowl of cereal. I'm like, if you could rank the top 3 most like obnoxious sounds, you're making all of them right now. There's clanging, there's slurping, there's crunching. He's like, oh, you can hear that? But he just didn't know. I'm like, yeah, I can hear everything, man. He's like, oh, I'm really sorry. But that was pretty bad. And I learned early too, like I used to, when I first started, I wouldn't speak up as quickly about audio issues because I didn't want to interrupt, or I didn't want to be rude, like sometimes people, like if they're using like the inline mic with headphones,
Right.
and they're kind of they're talking and they're kind of nervous and they're touching it and it's making all those sounds. I let that go on for like half an interview once, knowing I'm gonna have to try to edit that, and finally said something. And then after I sat down editing for 3 hours, I was like, next time I just interrupt them, just, hey man, yeah, don't fiddle with that. And then they're, oh, okay, and it's fine. But it's better to just nip it in the bud rather than try to be polite, because it just makes a nightmare later.
So I'm going to do something that I'm going to put the flashlight back on you. So in your show, and I've listened to many of your episodes, you ask several questions of your guests. And I'm going to ask you, because you're now in the hot seat, what was the best call that you ever had in law enforcement?
There's a few. I would say one time we were having a problem. The DPW was saying, we're finding trash. It's like Little Debbie wrappers and boxes all over the side of this street. And the people have nice lawns, all stuff. And it's every other day. It's just, and a lot of them are half eaten. Some of it looks like puke. The neighborhood's pissed. Like, they want to know who the hell's doing this. So the chief finally said, I think the DPW guy probably complained to the chief a bunch of times. And finally the chief wrote a memo and said, hey, at this time, try to concentrate a patrol over here. We don't know why this is happening, but the citizens are getting pissed and they want to know. It's just like this weird mystery. It's new boxes. They're not old. They haven't been sitting there. It's like someone's doing it on purpose. So I end up doing an extra patrol on the radio. I'm going to be in this area. And a guy in the neighboring town had kind of known just from meetups at night, overnights and stuff, kind of knew what we were doing. And he said, hey, I think I might have a lead for your little trash problem. And I'm like, really? I'm like, thinking like, why would you even care about it? I mean, besides to call and make fun of me for doing this patrol, why are you calling me? He's like, I actually stopped a girl pulling into the gym, and she had those little Debbie oatmeal cakes in those boxes and a bunch of wrappers everywhere. And like, some of them were like half eaten or looked like she ate it and then spit it out. And I pulled her over for speeding, but I thought it was weird. And then I looked at your log and saw that you're doing this patrol. And he said, I just thought this is the same trash. So he gave me her plate and all that, and called her house. Her parents answered. She's like 18, and ended up calling. She ended up calling me back, and she's like, what's going on? Is everything? She's very nervous. And I said, I just need you to come to the police department to chat with me. I just want to run something by you. So she came in, and I'm already sure it's her. I'm pretty sure it's her, because where she lives, this is the route she would take to go to the gym in the other town. And I'm thinking like, maybe she's dumping her family. Maybe she's just throwing her trash out the window. I'm thinking she's like maybe huge, going to the gym, but like just eating a ton on the way there. I don't know. I'm having trouble imagining why she's doing this, but I'm pretty sure it's her. I have her come in, and I knew enough where I said, I'm going to record it. I'm going to bring her in. I'm going to treat it actually like a soft interrogation. So I brought her in. I turned on the camera and I said, hey, this is just, we're going to talk about an issue that's going on that I think you might be involved in, and we're going to record it. And I'm going to read you Miranda. It's like on TV, don't let it freak you out. To even talk to you, I have to do it. And she's like, oh, okay. She's wicked nervous. During the interview, she breaks down, and I did this little thing. It was so cheesy, but I'm like, we sent those wrappers to the county for, and I know because of her age, I knew she might fall for it. She's not like a hardened criminal, I'm like, yeah, those prints are coming back in a couple days, and I really hope that wasn't from you. That's all I said. And she broke down and started crying, and she explained to me this huge battle she's had with this eating disorder. She's thin, pretty girl, and this huge battle she's had with an eating disorder, and how she's been bulimic, she's been anorexic, she's trying to go to the gym, but she can't impulsively eat and then spits it out to try to like just get the taste but not ingest the food. And then she doesn't want her parents to know, so she's throwing it out the window as she drives to the gym and the whole thing. So I ended up being able to get her into through the course and with social services, I got her into a program to get help, and she got help. And then I think like 2 or 3 years later, my mom said, I was getting, and that was all I heard of it. I didn't follow up nothing, because I felt like she was embarrassed, and I didn't want to stop by and say like, hey, how's everything doing? I just felt like it was one of those issues where I didn't want to push. I just wanted to hope she got better. And 2 or 3 years later, my mom was getting her toes done at a shop. She said, this lovely young lady does my toes. And, she said, she looked up at me the other day and she said, I want you to tell your son thank you. And she said, what are you talking about? And she told my mom the whole story. And she said, because of that interaction, I got help and I'm better now. I have a good steady boyfriend. I have this job and all that. And I felt, you don't get a lot of those in police work. And it was like, it wasn't a crime of the century, but I rode high on that for days. I felt good about myself. I was like, man, I really went the extra mile with that little trash case that was like a joke to everybody. And the girl got help and she's better now. That just felt great. That was one of the happiest memories I have.
That's one of those nice things about police work, and we see just horrible things all the time, and we're treated horribly in the media majority of the time and by the politicians all the time. So yeah, when we can help somebody out and get acknowledgement, and I know you and most other law enforcement officers, we don't do this for the acknowledgement. It's nice when we get it, but we don't do it. We do it because it's our job. Along those lines, what would you tell somebody who wanted to be a cop today? Would you recommend it?
It's such a battle. It's really tough. I would say if you really want to do it, you should do it, because we need good cops so badly, and we need people who are resilient to that type of thing, because they'll tell you in police academy that you're not going to be pats on the back, people aren't going to like you, but it's even worse now. It's so much worse now than even when I went through. And I would say what a lot of my guests would say, because I agree with them 100%, go on ride-alongs where you want to be a cop. Like, experience the job, see if it's for you. There's people who go on ride-alongs that, I've heard of young people going on ride-alongs and going to just a dead body, which are not nice. They are traumatic for people, especially when you're new, but just that turning them off. I can't do this. I can't be in the same room with a dead body. Or even an elderly person that's all ashen and, kind of sunken and looking the way they look, just couldn't do it. And that's like a pretty typical thing. Like, you're going to have to spend quite a lot of time there at that scene waiting for the right resources to show up to process it. And even just doing motor vehicle stops at night, like the uncertainty of that, and like just try to go on ride-alongs and get some experience to see if you have the temperament, before you even invest all this time. Because the worst thing I see happen is people getting into it. And I've seen around here now, they have college programs where like it's a 4-year college program, CJ degree, and at the end you graduate police academy with a 4-year degree. So they've incorporated police academy at the end with your degree. So it's almost like a European style or Canadian. Like you go through the college and then you graduate, and the end of it is police academy, And I've seen those people get on the job for 6 months and go, yeah, it's just not for me. So, oh my gosh, all that time, and then the academy, and then you never really, and they look great on paper, it's like psychological, everything flying colors, it's kept their nose clean, but it's just not, they don't have the temperament for it. They don't, can't, or they don't want to learn to process that kind of trauma. They just want to stay away from it. So I would say try to get involved in it. Try to do ride-alongs to see if you can hack it.
If people want to hear more about police work, you can follow Steve at his show, Things Police See. And then you also have like a Cop in the News sideshow, which is always entertaining. You bring some of your buddies on and talk about stuff that's in the news. And I always look at the cop news and the news every day anyways. Besides being depressed, there's some pretty crazy things that are going on. But yeah, it's called Things Police See. And thank you for your service. Thank you for not only being in law enforcement, but helping spread positive aspects of law enforcement to a lot of people and inspiring a lot of people. That's a great job that you're doing.
Oh, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. It's been an honor to be a guest on your show, and people should keep an eye out for Art Levy's episode, which will be coming out in the next few weeks. And he did also say that he wouldn't mind coming on Cops in the News, so that'll be a whole nother thing.
Yeah, that would be a blast. Really cool stuff. So I just want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight, and I'll link his show. And hopefully this not only worked on YouTube, but worked on Facebook. I'll find out momentarily if it did, because I can't really tell what's going on. And thank you to people who are tuning in live. I know there's one person I just want to say a shout out to, and that's a former sergeant of mine, John Kelly, who was on your show before.
Oh, hell yeah, John, the law enforcement life coach. Great guy.
Yes, law enforcement life coach. If, regardless of how many years you have on, if you ever have any issues or anything, reach out to this guy. He's terrific. But thanks again, Steve, and we will, of course, be talking to you soon.
All right, brother. Thank you.